Elizabeth Holmes's fraud sentence will send a message one way or another. The actress Ricky Noel Lander said Ms. Holmes was a trustworthy friend and a genuinely lovely person. And Channing Robertson, who was a professor of chemical engineering at Stanford University, commended Ms. Holmes for her compassion for others. Their comments were part of a cache of more than 100 letters that were filed over the last week to a federal judge in San Jose, California, in an effort to reduce the punishment for Ms. Holmes, the founder of the failed blood testing startup Theranos. In January, she was convicted of 4 counts of defrauding investors about Theranos's technology and business dealings. She is scheduled to be sentenced for those crimes on Friday. Ms. Holmes, 38, faces a maximum of 20 years in prison, according to federal sentencing guidelines for wire fraud. Her lawyers have requested 18 months of house arrest, while prosecutors have asked for 15 years of imprisonment. The probation officer in Ms. Holmes's case has recommended a sentence of 9 years. The decision lies with Judge Edward J. Davila of U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, who oversaw Ms. Holmes's trial last year. In addition to the letters from her supporters asking for leniency, he is set to take into account lengthy memos filed by her lawyers and prosecutors, and will consider whether Ms. Holmes has accepted responsibility for her actions. Most notably, Judge Davila must weigh the message that Ms. Holmes's sentence sends to the world. Her high-profile case came to symbolize the excesses and hubris of Silicon Valley companies that often play fast and loose with the law. Theranos raised $945 million from investors, valuing the company at $9 billion, on the claim that its technology could accurately run many tests on a single drop of blood. But the technology never worked as promised. Few tech executives are ever found guilty of fraud. So a lighter sentence for Ms. Holmes could send the wrong signal to the industry, legal experts said. Prosecutors argued that the letters of support for Ms. Holmes showed that she could not blame her crimes on a difficult upbringing. Holmes, with strong family support, exceptional educational opportunities and financial stability, chose to commit fraud, repeatedly, they wrote. In an 8-page, single-spaced letter, Billy Evans, Ms. Holmes's partner, wrote that much of what has been written about her was untrue, including the fact that she was a good salesperson. Liz has no ability to sell something, she simply believes in things with such depth that it is alluring, Mr. Evans wrote. She is more of a zealot than a showman. He said Ms. Holmes's notoriety had ruined any privacy and described a life under constant surveillance and threat. Prosecutors countered those portraits with evidence presented at Ms. Holmes's trial. She manipulated regulators, lied to the media, falsified documents, and intimidated whistleblowers, leading one employee, Tyler Schultz, to contemplate suicide, they wrote. She enjoyed the fruits of her fraud, they wrote, flying on a private jet, living in a $15 million mansion, appearing on magazine covers and dining at the White House. She repeatedly chose lies, hype, and the prospect of billions of dollars over patient safety and fair dealing with investors, they said. In addition to 15 years in prison, prosecutors asked the court to order Ms. Holmes to pay $804 million in restitution for harm done to Safeway and Walgreens, 2 companies that Theranos had partnerships with, and George P. Schultz, the former Secretary of State. Mr. Schultz, who did last year, was Tyler Schultz's grandfather and sat on Theranos's board.